Good day, ladies and gents, wherever you may be around the world, and welcome to this fairly casual, some okay. I think I do that every single time I do a stream, and I'm not sure how to stop it, to be honest. But yeah, welcome to this fairly casual stream about some of my favorite films, which was suggested to me by one of the members of my Discord. As I usually do, I'm going to start us off with a tune, and this one is from the very talented and based Australian singer and musician Chris Gard.
The wine they drink in paradise and making hot the rain. God brought it burning from the sun to be a sign and signify that they that drink the blood of God shall never thirst again. The wine they drink in paradise, they making hot the rain. Oh yes, they that drink the blood of God shall never thirst again. The wine they praise in paradise and make him Ponterey. The purple wine of paradise, that we are better at the price. It's wine they praise in paradise, it's cider that they pray. The wine they praise in paradise, they make him Ponterey. It's the wine they praise in paradise, it's cider that they pray. The wine they want in paradise, they find in Potter's End. The apple wine of Hereford, of Halford and Hereford, where woods went down to Hereford, and there I had a friend. The wine they want in paradise, they find in Potter's End, where woods went down to Hereford, and there I had a friend. The subbeat of the blessed go in the soft western vales. The road aside takes a cold, the road from heaven to her fore, where the apple wood of her ford goes all the way to Wales. The subbeat of the blessed go in the soft western vales, where the apple wood of her ford goes all the way to Wales. The wine they drink in paradise, they making hot the rain. Oh yes, they drink the blood of God, shall never thirst again.
Okay, that was from Chris Gard, who makes a very welcome change from the average lefty, gay, artistic musician type person that we have around these days. I like Chris Gard's channel, and I do suggest people go and subscribe to him. Okay, so someone in my Discord suggested to me the other day that I should do a stream on some of my favorite films. And so I thought, all right, I'll do that. Hello, Alan, in the chat, by the way, and everyone else in the chat. If anyone wants to join the stream, like Alan, for example, you are more than welcome. Just ask me in the Discord and I'll send you the link. But because I don't like speaking on my own too much, I'm only here because I got up to watch Putin's speech, and the chick I was with moaned at me, and I don't do women moaning at me anymore, so I just left. So anyway, As some of you may have guessed from the thumbnail from this stream, my first favourite film is probably going to be Zulu from 1964, I think it came out. It's not a totally accurate representation of the Battle of Rorke's Drift on the 22nd to the 23rd of January 1879, but it is pretty accurate, and it's a really good film. There were about 133 British soldiers manning what was a forward hospital and supply dump on the Natal, the British Natal colony side of the Buffalo River. They were attacked by about 4,500 Zulu warriors who hadn't fought at Isandlwana, where they had wiped out about 1,200 British local, colonial, and African soldiers fighting on the very side a few hours before. The Brits got a little bit of warning. Their commanding officer was a Royal Engineer, and Royal Engineers are good at fortifying places. That's one of their jobs. And they just about had time to put up some makeshift fortifications, and they fought for 12 hours from 4 o'clock in the afternoon until about 4 a.m. the next morning, maybe even a bit later than that. And they survived. They lost 23 guys dead and an awful lot of blokes wounded, and killed about 450 Zulus. God knows how many more of them they wounded, and they survived. Just through pure guts and discipline, basically. And for anyone who thinks, oh yeah, well the Brits had rifles and the Zulus didn't, well, the Zulus had 20,000 rifles in Zululand at the time that the Anglo-Zulu War broke out, and they captured like a lot more at Isandlwana. So the Zulus had quite a lot of firearms, and actually a lot of fighting at Rorke's Drift was hand to hand, like bayonet versus assegai stuff. And like I said, through pure grit and determination and a lot of discipline, the British survived. I've been to the real Rorke's Drift, which is not quite as scenic as the one in the film. The movie was shot in the Drakensberg Mountains, and in fact, one of the main mountains you can see in the background to the film, in fact, including in the thumbnail I use, is called Giant's Castle for obvious reasons. And when I was a much younger man, I was foolish enough to climb that and come back down again in the day to go and see a battlefield from pre the Anglo-Zulu War. So yeah, I guess I mean my old man took me to see Zulu when I was like 4 or 5, I think. Like they'd re-released it, and he took me to go and see it when I was 4 or 5. And apparently my mother turned around and said, "He's too young to go and look at that." And my dad said, "No, you'll like it." And my dad was entirely correct, because it stuck with me for many, many years. Partly, I suspect, because of all the bright colours and what have you. And part of the reason I moved to South Africa after I left the British Army in the early 1980s was because I'd seen that film, I think. So yeah, that would be my number one, would be Zulu, 1964. Great film. If you haven't seen it, go see it. It's really, really good. It's not totally accurate. One thing I would say is that Private Hook, for example, who is a guy in the hospital, in the movie is shown to be like this kind of lazy, doesn't want to do anything, barrack room lawyer type soldier, which is absolute nonsense. The real reason Hook was in the hospital was that he had been detailed to make tea for the hospital patients. And so when they were saying, well, who's going to defend the hospital, Hook got told, well, okay, you're going to defend this loophole and this window. Hook's granddaughters, who were elderly ladies in the 1960s when Zulu came out, actually stormed out of the premiere of the film because they were so disappointed about how their grandfather had been shown, because he wasn't a bad soldier at all. Hook stayed into the army stayed in the British Army up until like the early 1900s. He was a very, very good soldier. And in his later life, he always got huge headaches because he got an assegai, a Zulu spear, thrown at him that went through his sun helmet and actually like made a big cut on the top of his head. And he got bad headaches for the rest of his life because of that. But he was in no way this kind of barrack room lawyer. But the rest of the stuff Hook does in the movie, you know, like the brave stuff and flying room to room and cutting holes in the wall and all that was entirely true. That really did happen. So yeah, Zulu is a really, really cool movie, and I'm very fond of it. And if you haven't seen it, you really must, particularly if you're a British dude. Go and watch that film. It's so cool. Okay, number 2. I'm not going to go on about this one too much because a friend of mine called Flooded Basement, who is an Aussie YouTuber, is going to be doing a stream on this probably next Thursday, I think. I hope I'm going to be a guest on this stream, and we're going to be looking at this movie in some detail. And that is Master and Commander: The Far Side of the World from 2003. And this is like it's easily the best film ever made about the Royal Navy of the Nelson era. It's just great. They have what is now known as HMS Surprise, that was originally built. I'm trying to remember. I can't remember what she was originally called now, but she was built as a 28-gun British frigate in the US, by the way. She was built as a replica 28-gun British frigate, and she was adapted to make her look more like HMS Surprise should look. And of course, this is based on a series of like about 20 novels by the brilliant late Patrick O'Brian, that I absolutely recommend to everybody. They're some of my favorite books. Patrick O'Brian should have won the Booker Prize if the Booker Prize was not so, in inverted commas, woke and left-wing. Great author. And Master and Commander is just a classic movie. The only reason it didn't get more awards than it did was because it came out in the same year as one of the 3 Lord of the Rings films, which of course hoovered up everything. But it's a great film. It's a classic. And as I say, I'm not going to go on about this too much because I want to talk about it on Flooded Basement stream when we'll go into some of the stuff in detail. But it really is a good film. They did change 1 or 2 things in the film as compared. Look, it's not based on any one of the books in particular. It's based on 3 or 4 of the books mostly. But the main Far Side of the World book is based on. It should be an American ship that they're hunting, but of course you couldn't do that because the Americans were paying for the film, and so I guess most Americans wouldn't go and say, "Oh, we're the bad guys, aren't we?" Because Americans don't like being bad guys, you see. So anyway, but yeah, Master and Commander is probably my second favorite film. My third favorite film is The Cruel Sea. Now, The Cruel Sea is absolutely the best film about the Royal Navy in World War II, without any doubt whatsoever. Oh, okay. The Cruel Sea is without a doubt the best movie about the Royal Navy in World War II. It was made in 1953. It's based on a novel that was written by Nicholas Montserrat, who was a Royal Navy corvette officer during the Battle of the Atlantic. And a lot of people will tell you how great Das Boot is, you know, the boat, the German movie, and it is an excellent film, by the way. I absolutely recommend it. But if you want to know the British side of that stuff, you've got to go and watch The Cruel Sea, which is like the British escort side of what was going on. It's a really good film. Jack Hawkins plays the skipper of the ship, or ships, I should say. There are 2, so I don't want to do spoilers in these reviews, to be honest. yeah, there's two Royal Navy ships in the film, and it's got a lot of side stuff in it that you often don't see. Like one of the officers' wives is a complete slut who's just messing around with anyone while he's away at sea, which happened to a lot of British servicemen in World War II, and probably American, Canadian, Australian servicemen too, I dare say. But women are like that, sadly. But yeah, it's a really good film. They had an actual flower cast corvette to play the main ship. It's just excellent. It's a good film. If you haven't seen The Cruel Sea 1953, do go and see it. It's really good. Okay, well, so that's one I've looked at. All right, the next one I'm going to talk about is much less well known than any of those movies. It's a film by Cornel Wilde, who's an American dude, actor and producer and director, called The Naked Prey, and it was made in 1965. And if you've seen Zulu, you will notice one of the Afrikaner actors in The Naked Prey was also in Zulu. He played the Afrikaner dude at Rourke's Drift, who I'm not sure actually was Afrikaner. He might have been, but anyway, it doesn't matter. So yeah. Adaman says in the chat, Master and Commander may be my favorite film, full stop. Reading through the books at the moment. Yeah, like it is a great film, Adaman, totally agree. And the books are fabulous. They just really are great. The most, look, Master and Commander is the most accurate movie about the Royal Navy of Nelson's era that's ever been made, or probably ever will be made, to be honest. And I'm just sad they haven't made a second one, because I know that the star of the film, Russell Crowe, wanted to do a second one. So maybe might happen eventually. You never know. But yeah. So moving on, The Naked Prey. The Naked Prey is an excellent film. It was also filmed in Zululand. There are one or two African guys in that movie. You'll also see in Zulu if you keep your eyes out open. But because they're Zulus. But yeah, it was filmed in Zululand, where I lived for quite a long time, or on the edge of it, or actually these days it's like KwaZulu-Natal. I lived in Northern Natal. Zululand was a separate place then, it isn't anymore. But anyway, I knew loads of Zulus. The black guys in Northern Natal were Zulus, basically. But anyway, The Naked Prey is great. What it is these guys are doing an elephant hunting safari to get ivory and so on and make money. And the leader of it won't pay these African guys a bribe, basically. And so they get attacked by all these African warriors, and most of the dudes get killed in nasty ways, which are entirely accurate for Africa in the 19th century. But this one bloke who Cornel Wilde plays, because the Africans knew him before and he was a reasonably honourable bloke, they give him a chance. They strip him naked and give him 100-yard start, and then chase him with a load of warriors. And the whole movie is him trying to escape. And there's not a lot of dialogue in this film at all. There's a little bit, but not much. It's mostly this dude trying to escape from all these African warriors who want to kill him. It's a really good film. It was actually based on a short story which was set in America, and the guys chasing this dude were supposed to be Native Americans, American Indians, but they changed it and set in Africa. It's a very good film. If you haven't seen The Naked Prey from 1965, look it up, go and find it. It's a very, very good film. And there you go. That's my first four. What are we going to from here? Okay, then I'm going to talk about, this is another not very well-known film called The Sea of Sand. Sea of Sand is a 1958 British war film. It's based in the Second World War in the Western Desert, when the Brits were fighting Rommel and the Italians and so on. And it's based on the Long Range Desert Group. And the Long Range Desert Group were a quite like strange and uniquely British and Commonwealth formation, because they had like a Guards squadron, they had a Rhodesian squadron, and they had a Kiwi squadron, if I remember correctly. So they had like New Zealanders, they had Guardsmen, and they had Rhodesians. And they used to take these trucks hundreds and hundreds of miles through the deep, deep desert to go behind German lines. And they would do a lot of reconnaissance stuff, but they would sometimes also attack like German rear areas and this kind of stuff. And also eventually they ended up being a taxi service for the SAS when they started up rather later in the war. And this film is pretty good, actually. One of the like themes of the movie is that they get this Royal Engineer officer who's very regimental, like he's by the book on these things and all the rest of it. Whereas the Long Range Desert Group, because they were kind of piratical in some respects, were not very regimental for the most part. But actually, without, again, I don't want to do spoilers for these movies because I'm pretty sure a lot of people won't have seen many of them. Without doing spoilers, the regimental guy turns out to be like a good egg in the end. An excellent film that I would again recommend to people. That's Sea of Sand, and it was made in 1958. One of the things you will notice in this series of my favorite films is I have a weakness for stiff upper lip British war dramas from the 1950s and early 1960s. They were just different to other people's films. They weren't at all like American films. And the good thing about them, or one of the good things about them, in my opinion, is that the majority of the actors who were in those movies had actually served in World War II, and so had some idea of what was actually going on. You know, not very few of these actors in the 1950s or even the early 1960s hadn't been World War II soldiers, sailors, or airmen, so they had a little bit of idea of what was going on. Brian Borrow, I'm not going to like The Bridge on the River Kwai. I don't like that movie. I don't like that movie. I also don't like A Bridge Too Far. It's another movie I don't like. I do quite like The Man Who Would Be King, but I much prefer the Kipling short story to the movie that was based on it. Partly because the bloke who was playing the Gurkha in that is an Indian dude, or a Pakistani dude even, maybe. And certainly not a Gurkha. It doesn't even look anything like a Gurkha. So I'm not all that keen on that film. But yeah. So anyway, Sea of Sand, 1958, another great film. Go and see that. Now the next one is The Four Feathers. And the thing about The Four Feathers is it's been made so many bloody times into a film. It's set in the Sudan, and it's about a British officer who, it's based on a novel, by the way. And it's based on a British officer who, for some strange reason, doesn't work out that if he resigns his commission immediately before his regiment goes to war, everyone won't think he's a coward. Which I've never really worked out, because, as far as I'm concerned, any British officer or even of a rank who decided they're going to leave the army just before the unit is posted to active service, it doesn't take a great imagination to work out that you're going to be considered a coward. This film has been made, let me think, I'm going to look it up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 times this has been made into a film. Now, if you want to know, the ones I like are the 1939 Four Feathers with Ralph Richardson in it. And I don't mind the 1955 Storm Over the Nile version, and I don't absolutely detest the 1978 version. The 2002 version is very woke and politically correct, and was made by an Indian dude, and it shows very strongly. So I don't like that one. But the 1939 Four Feathers is pretty good. 1955 is fine. The 1978 one's okay. So yeah, go and check the Four Feathers out. I think about the film in most respects. My next one is Dunkirk, but it isn't the Christopher Nolan Dunkirk, which I think is crap. The Christopher Nolan Dunkirk has got, it's nothing like what happened at all. Doesn't have enough people. It's got nothing to do with the Royal Navy. There's a load of Royal Air Force in it, which shouldn't be in it at all. It's not a good film at all. It's one Christopher Nolan film I don't like at all. The Dunkirk I like is the 1958 one, starring John Mills, which is actually a really good film. Much more realistic than the Christopher Nolan more recent version. If you want to know what really happened at Dunkirk and how the Royal Navy overwhelmingly picked up the British Army, it wasn't all these little boats. The little boats played a vital role, but they were mostly ferrying soldiers out to the Royal Navy ships. And the Royal Navy lost a lot of ships getting the soldiers off the beaches there, and they had already done the same thing in Norway, and they ended up doing the same thing further south in France, and they ended up doing the same thing in Greece, and they ended up doing the same thing in Crete. In fact, the Royal Navy got quite bored with picking up defeated British armies in the Second World War, but you have to look at a dude called Winston Churchill to work out why that kept happening. But yeah, Dunkirk 1958, good film, far better than that Christopher Nolan nonsense that came out much more recently. If you've seen that, go and see the 1958 movie. It's far, far better, would be my opinion. So yeah, there's another one. Where are we going to now? Oh yeah, the Yangtze Incident, another good film about the Royal Navy. It was made in 1957, and it's about the 1949 Yangtze Incident, where the little British frigate HMS Amethyst was trapped up the Yangtze River in China by the communists. And the Brits, through some deception and also a lot of guts, managed to fight their way out in this little frigate from this vast communist Chinese surrounding people. In America, by the way, it's got this ridiculous title, Battle Hell, for some reason. But the British title is Yangtze Incident, which is much more accurate. Again, good film. Stars Richard Todd, who fought in World War II, and it's an excellent movie about the Royal Navy in the 1940s, fighting their way out from a communist Chinese trap with a very small ship with no armor. Had a few guns, but no armor whatsoever, and they break out. And good film, like it a lot. So there's an award. So how are we going? That's about what, 8? I think I've done so far, something like that. Where are we going? Planet of the Apes. Planet of the Apes is not going to be on this one, Cool Chickens. These are my favorite films, and my favorite films tend to be historical. All right. I might do another stream sometime where I'll go on about some of the movies that I like that are, I don't know, how could you describe them? Like movies I like that might be described as science fiction or high fantasy and this kind of stuff. Like I like the original Terminator movie, but I like the original more than I like the second one. I like the original Predator movie, but I like the original much more than the second one. And the subsequent movies of all those series don't give a toss about. I actually prefer the second Alien movie to the first one, but that's exceptional for me. But I'm not going to be talking about those sorts of films on this stream. I'm going to be talking about the films I really like, and they're all pretty much, they're mostly historical or adventure type movies, to be honest, the ones that I really like. So anyway, yeah. So my next one is actually a South African movie, and it's called Shangani Patrol, and it's from 1970. And you used to be able to find this on YouTube. Don't tell YouTube because I'll probably yeet it if you do. But you used to be able to find it on YouTube, and it's based on a true incident in Rhodesia in the 1890s when the Rhodesian were trying to track the Matabele who were fighting them. And the Matabele had retreated, so they sent this patrol after them, a mounted patrol of local dudes who were mostly Brits, but there were guys from other countries, including at least one American. And they eventually got surrounded by this huge Matabele army. There was only like about 50 of them or so, and they got surrounded by a Matabele army and whacked out to a man. So, spoiler alert for the movie, but it's a good film and it tells the story fairly accurately, actually. So, Shangani Patrol, 1970. As I said, used to be on YouTube, may well still be on YouTube. Go and check it out. It's a good film. So, there's another one. Oh, yeah, this is one that someone in the chat, I can't remember who it was now, actually predicted I would like. And it's The Wild Geese from 1978, I think. Yeah, 1978. Wild Geese is a good movie. Part of the reason it's a good movie is that they got Major Mike Hoare, the mercenary dude, to act as the advisor on the film. And it's about a group of British mercenaries doing daring do in Africa in the late 1960s, early 1970s. It's actually a pretty good film. Some big British stars in it. Not a bad film. Military Theorist in the chat asks if I like Gallipoli with Mel Gibson. I like it a bit. I don't like it that much, to be honest. It's not a bad film, Military Theorist, but yeah, not my favorite, I have to say. I have another Australian film I much prefer to it, which I will talk about shortly. In fact, I've got 2 Australian films on this list, so there you go. I think like the problem with Gallipoli is it's too much in that genre of Aussie films about how bad the Brits were, which were quite common at one stage. Like I think it was Clive, somebody, I can't remember his name now, who said the Australians had never forgiven the Brits for being so far away from Australia. And I think there's some truth in that, speaking as an Englishman who lives in Australia. So, yeah. But anyway, do go and check out that last one. Let's get on to the next one. The Wild Geese, 1978. Good film. Also includes the God's Own rifle, includes the SLR. Like most of the British Mercs have these SLR rifles. So yeah, go and check that out. It's a good film. I like the SLR because that was my rifle when I joined the British Army. So. The next one is Khartoum, which was made in 1966 and stars Charlton Heston, strangely, playing Major General Charlie Gordon of the Royal Engineers. And in my opinion, it's Charlton Heston's best film. I don't think he ever made a better film than Khartoum. He's far too tall to play Charlie Gordon, who was only about, I think he was about 5'6" or 5'7". So Charlton Heston's far too tall. But other than that, I think he does a damn good job of playing it. Craig 55, I talked about the Four Feathers about 5 minutes ago in the stream. And yes, the versions from 1939 up to about 1970 are okay. Just don't watch later ones. Khartoum is about Charles Gordon trying to defend Khartoum from the Mahdi and the Dervish Ansar. Good film, well made, well acted, pretty accurate uniforms, pretty accurate weapons. Like the Egyptians even have Remington rolling block rifles, for God's sake, which is pretty accurate. Also shows that the Mahdi had loads of rifles and artillery, which he actually did. Are Bane's Sword of Agility. Did I know Oliver Twist was banned in 2 different countries for diametrically opposite reasons? I haven't. Bane's Twist. I've never seen Oliver Twist in 1948 ever, so I have no idea about that movie. I probably wouldn't watch it, to be honest. I know they made a musical called that at some point, but I've never watched it, so I detest musicals. I utterly detest musicals. The only ones I've ever watched have been under protest or not paying any attention to when I've been with some bloody woman, you know. So yeah, I don't watch musicals. And Oliver Twist, I've never read the book. I haven't read a great deal of Charles Dickens, to be honest with you. Apart from Tale of Two Cities, I read that one, but not much else. But yeah, anyway, cartoon, great film. Charlton Heston's best movie. He even gets away with the accent for the most part. So that's another one to go and watch. That's from 1966. The next one is Waterloo from 1970. Excellent movie. Really good film. Tells the story of Waterloo. Who dares wins his crap? By the way, Brian Borough. Tells the story of the Battle of Waterloo and how the British and King's German Legion soldiers mostly won it by the time the Prussians eventually turned up. It's a good film, and Christopher Plummer plays an excellent Wellington. I would absolutely recommend that film. That's another one you can probably find on YouTube if Susan hasn't yeeted it yet. Do go and check that out. My criticism of Waterloo is that it doesn't show any of the British light cavalry, like hussars and all this kind of stuff, and light dragoons. And the only British cavalry you see in it are the Scots Greys. But you know, there we go. You can't have everything, I guess. So yeah, Waterloo 1970 is another good film. Do go and check that out. Oh, here we go. The first Australian movie I'm going to mention is The White Horseman from 1987. And this tells the story of one of the last great cavalry charges in history, when the Australian Light Horse charged Beersheba in Palestine against the Turks and captured the damn place because the Turks weren't expecting them to charge home. And because they were mounted infantry, basically, armed with rifles, who were expected to use their horses to move and then dismount. When they charged into the town, they ended up using these great big long 18-inch bayonets that short magazine M4 rifles had back in World War I as swords, or sometimes sticking them on their rifle and using the rifle and bayonet as a kind of lance. Really good film. And all of the characters in it are true people who, if you watch the movie right to the end, they tell you what happened to them in their life. The ones who didn't die. But yeah, good film. Aussie movie, The White Horseman from 87? Yeah, 1987, The White Horseman. That's an actual good movie. Initially, when you watch it, there is some soppy love story bullshit in the early bits. But if you get through that, you will eventually get to the charge at Beersheba, which is really well shown, and it's a good film. So another one I would absolutely recommend to people. Now the next one is this is my favorite Burt Lancaster movie, which is Alzheimer's Raid from 1972. This is the first American film I've mentioned. This is a really good film. Good Western. Good cavalry Western, I guess you'd call it. It's about this group of Apaches who break out of their reservation and go on a killing spree, and this young American officer has to go and take his troop of cavalry and try and track them down. And Burt Lancaster plays the scout who is married to or lives with an Apache woman. And he knows the Apache and he likes them, but he also doesn't have any illusions about them being noble savages or any nonsense like that. Which is why it's a good film. It's quite cynical. But yeah, it's a good movie. I would definitely recommend Alzheimer's Raid. If you like Western films and you like films about the American cavalry and the Western stuff, in my opinion, that's one of the very best ones. Very good, well worth seeing. Again, from 1978. Today they couldn't make it because today there'd have to be a woman in charge, and the Indians would be wonderful and the white guys would all be evil. But so they can't make films like that anymore at all. Airborne sort of Arbene's sort of agility. Yeah, I like the Outlaw Josie Wales. That's a movie that I could mention. I do like that. I like Unforgiven also by Clint Eastwood, but it's a bit beyond my remit. I mean, I like The Wild Bunch. That's a film I like. But as I said, I'm going for my favorite films here, which are not necessarily Westerns. I like historical kind of movies, and that's why Alzheimer's Raid got in there rather than some of these other ones. Okay, so where are we going now? I got a list of all these movies set up on another browser. And the next one I'm going to go on is The Sand Pebbles from 1962. This is the story of an American gunboat on Chinese rivers between the wars. And it stars Mr. Cool himself, Steve McQueen. I'm a big Steve McQueen fan. I think he was great. Made quite a lot of good films. But for me, this is his best movie. He plays an engineer who's in charge of the engines on this little ancient gunboat, which the Americans supposedly captured from the Spanish during the Spanish-American War. And it's on these backwater rivers off the Yangtze. It's too small to be on the Yangtze itself. And it's just a really good film. Part of it was kind of supposed to be making some sort of commentary about the Vietnam War, I believe, although it was made in 1962, when the Americans were not really very heavily involved in Vietnam. But that's what people say these days. But it's a really good movie. Ends up with some good fight scenes. There's a nice battle, and the American warship has to break through this Chinese boom. And it's just a good film. And like I say, Steve McQueen was mystical. And to me, that is absolutely one of his best films. Like, I'm not such a fan of some of the other films that everyone talks about with Steve McQueen, like Bullet, for example. I'm not a big fan of Bullet. I did like The Getaway. The Getaway is the other Steve McQueen movie I really like. And I like that one that he did quite near the end of his life, Tom Horn, which is a Western. That was pretty good. But like, if you really want to see Steve McQueen at his peak, then go and watch The Sand Pebbles. That's a really good film from 1962. Excellent film. Great Escape. Yeah, it's all right. I don't like it as much as some people might, because the Americans get a much bigger part in that movie than they really should have had in the Great Escape. And Steve McQueen is a totally fictional character in that film, by the way. But I do like Steve McQueen as an actor. He really was Mr. Cool. A good dude. And as I said, apart from The Sand Pebbles, my favorite movie with Steve McQueen is The Getaway, which is excellent. Unlike the remake, which is crap. The original Getaway is a great film. Go and watch that if you haven't seen it. So, yeah. Okay, moving on. What have we got to now? Oh, yeah, another Australian film. Danger Close, The Battle of Long Tan. This is a really, really good film, and it was made in 2019, believe it or not, when it's very difficult to find good films. And it's based on a true story. It's the biggest Australian battle in the Vietnam War. And basically what happened was a company of about 109, off the top of my head, Australian diggers, Australian soldiers, were attacked by 2 battalions of Main Force Viet Cong. And they managed to fight them off. They lost a lot of guys, but they managed to fight them off through sheer guts, determination, and discipline. Great. It's a good film. It's pretty accurate. The bloke who produced it did a great documentary on the real Battle of Long Tan, which you can find on YouTube. Look for Sam Worthington's Battle of Long Tan, because Sam Worthington does the commentary on it. And the guy who produced the film did this documentary, and they interviewed loads of the survivors on both sides. So it's a good film, well worth watching. Danger Close, Battle of Long Tan, 2019, really good film, well worth watching. And actually, the last movie I went to the cinema to see, to be honest, was like, I don't watch most modern films, which are basically a anti-straight white male propaganda. Arbeyn's Sword of Agility in the chat says Gettysburg is good. Yes, I agree. Gettysburg is good. They made another one as well, which features Stonewall Jackson. What's that called? Gods and Generals, I think. That's also pretty good. But both of those movies are quite good. Yeah, I agree with that. Wouldn't make my top 15 movies, but they would be up there somewhere for sure. Okay, so there's that one. And the last one I'm going to particularly pick out this evening is a movie called All Is Lost, starring Robert Redford, and from 2013. And basically, Robert Redford is playing this late middle-aged, going on to elderly yachtsman who basically has a collision with a container in the ocean and has to try and save his yacht to start with, and then has to survive off the shipping lanes. And I have done quite a lot of sailing in my life. I like sailing. It's the second best thing in the world. All Is Lost is a really, really good film. It's another film with not a lot of dialogue in it, because it's basically just Robert Redford. And like when he's not trying to get his radio working, he's not saying a lot, to be honest. But it's a really good film. And if you like dramas, see it. It's a good film. I have to give a couple of honourable mentions here. The Sharp TV series or TV movies are worth watching. If you haven't seen them, go and see those. They're pretty good. I don't mind the books they're based on by Bernard Cornwell, although every time Sharp says "my lady," I throw up in my mouth just a little bit because he's such a simp. But apart from that, they're not bad. And also, I would say the Hornblower TV movies series are also well worth watching if you haven't seen them. They're pretty good as well. So yeah, I think that's probably most of the films I wanted to talk about that like immediately spring into my head. Also for Robert Redford's second best film, apart from All Is Lost, is Jeremiah Johnson, where he plays this mountain dude. He plays a mountain man who like fought in the Mexican-American War in the 1840s, and then he goes off into the mountains. And eventually he gets together with this Indian chick and this other Indian tribe killer. And then he spends years trying to get revenge by going around killing these people. And it's based on a true story, as far as I understand. And that is a pretty good movie. Jeremiah Johnson's another one I'd look out for from Robert Redford. I'd say like that one and All Is Lost are his two best films on the whole. So, yeah. So I would recommend those. I think that's probably all of them, unless anyone wants to suggest anything else in the chat. If you do, I'll tell you what I think of it. I don't know what you're talking about. They're called chickens, but whatever. Yeah, well, Jersey Wells, Our Veins, Sword of Agility is a good movie. And as I said, I also like The Unforgiven by Clint Eastwood. That's also a very good movie. Hang 'em High is pretty good as well. But I'm a fairly big Clint Eastwood fan. Of like when he was doing stuff when he was much younger. Yeah, for sure. But anyway, guys, just some suggestions for films. All of them are well worth watching. I will be back on Saturday evening UK time at 9 p.m., which I think is 5 a.m. for me in Australia. That's about, actually, I don't know what it is for Greenwich Mean Time. It should be about 2000, but something like that. And this week's Splendid Isolation stream partly is going to be a Northern Ireland special. We're going to be talking about Northern Ireland, and I'm hoping we will have some guests from my Discord who are from Ulster or are loyalist Irish guys. So that should be worth looking out for. 2 weeks' time on a Thursday, I'll have part 4 of the stream I've been doing with Horace and Atman on British foreign policy and defence policy from 1914 to 1942, and I think that will probably be the last part of that. But we'll see how we go, because we didn't get as far as I hoped we would on this Thursday. Don't forget to like the stream, chaps. It helps the channel. And also subscribe so you don't miss any further content. So I do occasionally do these little not off-the-cuff streams when I've got nothing else better to do and I'm a bit bored. So there you go. All right, gents, go well, and I will see you all hopefully on Saturday evening UK time, Sunday morning Australian time. Take care. And don't give up the fight, by the way.